share some more data on my energy usage using the graph from the MySolArk app. And I've just recently decided to add another 15K, and I'll show why that is. But what you're looking at right here is this is when I first commissioned the system on June 21st. As you can see the date right here. And I put it online. It started out at about, what was that, 17:55, so almost 6 o'clock in the evening at 100%. And then dropped all the way down to 36% by 8:05 the next morning. And this was with the initial 30 kilowatt hours of battery. And you can see the way it charged during the day. And I can turn off some of the views, and we can see this was my base load for the house from midnight. As you see the timeline across the bottom. So right at maybe 11 or 1200 watts, and then during the later part of the day, it based up more around almost 2000 watts, maybe 1800 if you tried to average it. But that's how it typically began. Here's the next day. It bottomed out at 25% at 7:30 in the morning, and then by noon, 12:30, it was up to 100%. So it had recharged itself, and it held it until about, looks like 4:40 is when it started discharging the battery, and then on to the next day. If I jump to the 25th, this is showing you initially it would hold 100% because, again, this was June, and so the days were longer. This is an example of a very nice charge profile, at least for me. Plenty of sun, just a good charge. And it would hold 100% from, as you see, 11:15 all the way to about 5:05. And my math told me that if I could have 100% at least until about 5 o'clock, 4:45, at a 30 kilowatt battery bank, I was able to make it through the night, and the battery would cycle back, which, if you see here again, it dropped down to about 33%. So I used, what was that, 67% out of a 30 kilowatt battery bank. So that was, I used 20 kilowatt hours. And that seemed to be the trend for quite some time. And I made some notes so I could jump straight to some of these sites to show you. Again, here it hit 100% at 1. You see, this was a crappy day for charging. I don't remember what the weather was that day, but it's obvious. But it still hit 100% by 1, bounced around a little bit, and held 100% until about 6:40. Again, this was long days and not much heat right now. And then can move on. This was the very first crappy day. We bottomed out at 39% in the morning, but there was not a good charging day, as you can see. And I only got up to 69% state of charge, as you can see on there. So I made the decision here to go back on the grid, and you can see where I disconnected the load from the Sol-Arks. And I left it, and then the next morning, let me get this out of the way. You can see the charge profile. It charged up quite well. It hit 100% at 10:05 in the morning, and it held it until about maybe 3. And then down it went again, bottomed out at 35%, which was telling me I was using about 20 some odd kilowatt hours per night. And I thought I was doing well with 30 kilowatt hours until we got into the summer. And so let's jump into July. And July 14th, was when I had a, you see right there on the state of charge, 19%. That, let me turn some of this off and you'll see, the inverter protected itself when it, oh, turn back off, come on. It was about 7 in the morning. All the power went out because we dropped below 20%. You can see the last state of charge it listed right there when it looked was at 7 o'clock was 20%. And then, oh, you should know that this app, it only looks at data on like 5-minute intervals. So there's a 5-minute lag. So by 7:05, it had already shut off and it was at 19%. And so, of course, it stayed off until I had enough sunlight to provide power for the house and charge the battery. So that was where I first learned that I was not going to have enough battery capacity as we got into the summer months. And let's see if we can look at this. On the 15th, the next day, see a good charge profile. But what was happening is, let me get over here, is at 4:30 was my 100% start declining. And so my base load was starting to increase later in the day. So here's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and the load's already 2,300 watts. And it's above the 2,000 mark for most of the time. Down here in the south, on the north part of the Gulf Coast, it gets hot and it stays hot till late in the evening. And then this was the 16th, was another day where I ended up dropping the load just because it wasn't enough. And then this was a crappy day, as you can see. Still got 100% and held 100% until 6:15, and I allowed it to run again. So on the 24th is when I added another 10 kilowatt hours of battery capacity. And let's see how I wrote that down. Because you can see the load was disconnected until I got the battery. And right here, this is where I turned the load back on, but then I had to turn it off to actually parallel the two new modules in and then go from there. State of charge. You can see where it dropped. The reason you see a drop there is because right here, my capacity was 40 kilowatt hours. And no, wait a minute, it was 30 kilowatt hours, and I added 10 more, so the actual state of charge is lower now as a percentage until it charges those new modules up. They only come at 50% state of charge. And then I was going to show you an example of a good day at that time. Very nice charge profile. I've heard Scott Hunt of Practical Preppers refer to it as a shark fin. And you can see it was noon, it hit 100%, and it held it until about 4:10. And again, as you see, we're getting later into the summer now, so the length of time that I'm holding this 100% is less because I'm starting to use more energy at that time of the day as the solar production drops. When it can no longer, this span right in here, as you see, my panels are producing enough for my load. But then when I get to right here, the load exceeds what my array can produce by itself, and I start drawing off the battery. And that happens earlier in the day in the summer as you get later into the summer. And then I have another one that was in August, was the 12th. I said that was a bad day. As you can see, the weather was terrible. The charging, couldn't charge. I started that morning off at 48%. Now that's 48% of 40 kilowatt hours because I added the 10. But I didn't get enough charge. It really only barely. And because I dropped the load, topped out right here at 78%. As you can see right here, I made the decision that I'm going to have to shut the load off just to, I'll show you, let's see. See, I dropped, darn it, accidentally hitting the button. About 3 in the afternoon, I turned the load off, and I still was able to get enough charge up on my state of charge up to 78% that I felt like I'd be able to make it through the night. And I turned the load back on. And then this was the next day. So it went all the way down to, from that 78% to 44. But that wasn't from the full length of time. You know, I didn't turn it back on until after the sun went down. And then it was still kind of not a very good day for charging, but it still got it up to 100%. And as you see, it only held it until 4:55, which was pretty good. And then I let it run. But that told me I was still going to be running into an issue with battery capacity. So I added another 10 kilowatt hours, and I put that on September 8th. Let's see. As you can see here, this little dip right here, that is where, and you see the load. If you can recognize the little orange line here, that's the load line without me turning everything off to make it more visible. But this was the point where I had to disconnect the load so that I could parallel the next two modules in. And of course, the state of charge dropped, and then it came back up as it topped off those two modules to bring it up to 100%, and that was at 4:25. So then the next morning, it only went down to 57%, but now that's 57% of 50 kilowatt hours. So that means I used 43%, and do the calculator here. So that means I used 21.5 kilowatt hours, which was a trend up to this point. It's just typically 20 to 22 kilowatt hours every night. The only issue I would have is how early in the day I'm going to start pulling off the batteries. And then, you know, we're getting out of the summertime now. And so the nights are not being as warm. Let's see if I can see a base load here that might be interesting. Still getting some warmness towards the, you know, this is the morning, 5:30 in the afternoon. Down here, right around 2 o'clock is usually the hottest part of the day, and then it'll hold it in the summer and late summer. So my base load here is, looks like it's about 1,1300 watts, but it's less than it was in the middle of summer. Let's have another one for you. 11/11, November 11th. This was the incident that told me I needed another SolArk 15K. So right up to this point, I'm running on 50 kilowatt hours of battery storage and one 15K inverter, and everything has, other than, as you saw, where I was running out of battery capacity, everything else was working fine. But excuse me, on November 11th, if you recall in the news, we had that very harsh winter blast roll through the eastern coast, and it got all the way down here on the Gulf Coast, and we broke some records. Well, this was the morning of the record-breaking cold. It got down to 28 degrees here. And at 7:20 in the morning, I was up drinking coffee and heard my heater turn on and start speeding up. It's one of those continuously variable ream high efficiency units that I had put in specifically to handle solar. And evidently there was something else, one of my other mini splits cut on or something, but right at 7:20, you see the load peaks at 12,900 watts, which is under what a SolArk can handle, but remember what I said, this data is only in 5-minute blocks. Well, the next clip, it shut the inverter down. And I went out there and I had the very first error message. It was a voltage overload, or I forget what it was. But it shut off the inverter. So I had to switch the house back to the grid, and I left it there for about an hour. And then as soon as I started getting, as you can see, I'm getting some solar ramping up here. Then I switched the house back onto solar. And everything was fine for the rest of the day. You see, though, it took until 1:30, and I only got 94%. Now I'm getting into the winter where the sun angle is lower in the sky. My solar window around my array, if you look at any of the other videos, I tried to compress it into a small area to maximize what I can get. And this is where the limitation comes in. At 1:30 is when it only got to 94%, and it started discharging again just shortly after that, as you can see, about 2:30. But with the capacity I have now, it still was able to make it through the night. And as you see here, the next morning was not a record cold, but it was almost as cold. And the same situation kind of presented itself again, but this time the inverter didn't shut down. So evidently, whatever was the straw that broke that camel's back the day before didn't fall on its back today. But those two incidents, getting at the very beginning of this winter, and made me think that I really need another 15K to cover whatever loads I may have because of the heating requirements. So anyway, I ordered it. And as you can see, it got up to 94%. Still wasn't able to get to 100%. Because even though it was a good sun profile, it stopped too early. Again, it didn't really stop. It's just the sun got behind some other trees. It's lower in the sky. And I'm just not getting as much. This day, I was able to come by and get it. It got 100%, which was good. And that's just what I was showing you with these. I've got another day. Let's see, the 14th. This is just an example of how the days, the sun is going down earlier. So I still managed to hit 100% by right at noon, which is good when you have a good, bright, sunny day. It'll do that. But as you see, I'm trying to get the dot right on it, at about 2:20 in the afternoon, the sun has already moved to the point where I'm already shading a good number of my panels, and I start having to draw off the battery. So this is going to tell me how I'm going to make it through the winter, and I'm already having some issues today. Today being December 4th. But I was going to show you, let's see. Let me jump to the 30th. Okay. So we've had several bad days at the end of November of weather. I only got up to 86% on the 29th. Could only make it up to, well, let's see, discharged all the way down to 46%. So I only used 40-something percent, but still, that's of 50 kilowatt hours. So that's still 20 some odd kilowatt hours of power I'm using every night. A very poor profile for the day. Took it till, what was that, 3:15 in the afternoon just to get 84%. And, oh, let's check the base load here. Now, you see, we're getting colder. Now, we have our thermostat set at 68 because we like to dress warm down here. We don't get to do it that often. And base load seems to be about maybe 1,000 watts. That's early in the morning up until about late afternoon. And then I was doing some work in there getting prepared to put the new Sol-Ark in place, so I dropped the load down to do that and then put it back. So that was just a little maintenance issue out there. And so then this was on the 1st. This is when I actually did all the work to put it all together. I had to redo my AC lines. I had to put them into a combiner, a power distribution block. I'm going to put a video up just showing how that looks. I'm not going to tie it to this one since I'm already taking a lot of time here with this data. But this is where I shut the system down. And during this time period right here, I left the charging going on because it was still poor weather, overcast, cold, wasn't really building up much power. And I figured that was a good time to leave the house on the grid while I was having to move my 4-aught lines around and put them in the PDB block and fuse disconnect and all that. And so left it that way, tried to let it charge up more, and it still only hit 82%. And then this is where I put it back on. Right here. This is where I turned my load back on. It was on the December 2nd, which was day before yesterday. And you see my base load again running around. Well, this, I'm glad I caught this. When I paralleled them, I didn't add the slave inverter correctly to the plant. So right here, it's only showing the load that the master inverter, my original 15K, is providing. I had to go back in and what they call bind the slave inverter to the master on this app here so that the data would be combined. And let's see if did it happen on this day, or was it today or yesterday? I think I did it yesterday and I got it straight. Let me see if yeah. Because you can see now my base load was not 600 watts at this time with all this going on. This was just from the one inverter, but then when I actually corrected it, you can see how the base load came up. Still only charged up to 71%. And now today's the 4th, and it's a terrible rainy day out there right now, and I got up this morning and I just switched the house back onto the grid because the state of charge had gotten down to 27%. I was just short, just short of it wanting to shut off again. And so this morning, right at 7:10, I disconnected from the solar and put us back on the grid. And you can see it's still not even charging hardly. I'm still at 27% as I'm making this video right now, which is telling me I'm either going to have to add some more battery capacity or I'm going to have to do some extra solar panels somewhere along the line. But this is the worst it's gotten, and I hope this data helps anybody looking at it as you plan for what your system can do. I went back to the day before. The solar profile was pretty good up until noon. And then, as you can see, I was only getting 10,000 watts of PV at 1045, but it just didn't hold it long enough. And the batteries didn't have enough. And I was still drawing on it at the same time. So, hope this helps. Hope it wasn't too long for anybody. And I'll put another video out, a short one, just showing the second 15K and the cabling and all of that, and see if anybody finds that useful as well.